Hello, thank you for joining us. This is a presentation for the Sure Club Student Undergraduate Research Experience at the University of Saskatchewan. My name is Merle Massey. I'm the coordinator for undergraduate research here at the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm actually going to be giving the presentation today. So I'm going to stop my video or stop my personal video because you guys don't need to see me. And then I will share my screen and we'll get started on the presentation. So today our presentation, and thank you for those of us who are joining, is how to read a journal article. And because this is one of those things that nobody really explains to you as a university student, or very rarely. There's the odd professor that takes the time to go through this with you. It's just something that you pick up and learn kind of on the job of being a student. But today I thought I'd give a bit of a lesson in how I read a journal article and some thoughts on that. So there's two reasons to read a journal article. The first reason is that you are being asked to do it, or you've been asked to do some kind of a project or a paper or a thesis. And so you need to actually not just read one journal article, but several journal articles. So you need to identify which ones are good, which ones are useful, which ones are relevant, and you need to learn how to do that really fast. So this is about skimming and sorting and figuring out what's going to actually work and give you a good enough mark to get through to the end of the project. It's also about learning how to piece your articles together and fit them together like a bit of a puzzle. This is about doing a literature review or a synthesis article or to set yourself up to do more active research than that. So that's one of the first reasons for doing a research article. So that'll be the first part of my presentation. We'll focus in on the skill sets that you need if you're being asked to read several journal articles. The second part is if you're being asked to present on just one article. So if a professor or in a tutorial that you've been given one article and you're being asked to understand that article really deeply and explain it to others. So this is what happens in a journal club or in a tutorial presentation or sometimes in a group project or in a lab situation where you're being asked to really dive in and explain just one article. So the second half of the presentation will concentrate on the skill set and the sorts of things, the expectations that are outlined in that. So that's how I've set this particular presentation today. First, we're going to talk about what it's like when you have to do several and then just presenting on one. So let's say that you need 5 articles. Let's say that you've been asked to do an imaginary report, an 8 or a 10-page essay or whatever it is, and there's a minimum number that you have to consult 5 peer-reviewed journal articles for your paper or your report. So how do you do that? How do you do that? So first, this is about reading to find what you need. So this is the art of skimming. This is the art of using the library effectively and quickly to get what you need as quickly as you can. Here's the key. The key to doing this is the more clear and focused your research question, the easier it will be to find what it is that you need. So if you've just got a really big topic like climate change or, Western Canadian history or something really huge, you're going to be there for a while and you're not going to be really sure what you're looking for. So the more clear and focused your research question, the easier this whole process will be. Now, this is not that. So the presentation today is going to jump over that particular skill set and jump right into how to skim to find a journal article. So if you're looking for things like refining a research topic and developing a research question, or comprehensive searching for your literature review, actual tips and tricks from librarians about comprehensive searching for your literature review, or about finding and evaluating sources for your essay or your research project, please go to the University of Saskatchewan Library. And Courtney, I'm just going to turn you off. Please go to the University of Saskatchewan Library and find the links under the library workshop. So on the main library page, it's called Get Help. Click on that and you'll see workshops. Click on the workshops and it will take you to all kinds of workshops that have already been presented or are upcoming at the University of Saskatchewan. You can click on those. Most of them have already been recorded, but go ahead and watch them if you're looking for help on how to refine your research topic or how to conduct a literature review. So this presentation is not that, but start there. If you're actually ready for the art of skimming, sorry about that. That is a phone call here in my house. I will just get rid of that. Do not read the whole paper. So the art of skimming is about the 3 steps. Do not read the whole paper. The 3 steps are, first of all, title. Does it relate to your topic? No? Okay, skip. So what'll happen is that you'll put in your keywords and you think that this is that you've done a really good job. You've put in your keywords and it's going to give you exactly what you want. Well, guess what? The keywords that you think are going to pop up the results that you're looking for, sometimes you might get the results you're hoping for, but you might get a whole bunch of other gobbledygook. And so do make sure that you take a look at that first. Does the title actually relate to your topic? No? All right, get rid of it. Keep on going. Somebody really needs me, but that's too bad. Second is read the abstract. Is it likely to be useful? So that's your second step. So if you think you've read the title and you're like, okay, yeah, this maybe could work, go ahead and read the abstract. Take the time. It'll only take you about 30 seconds to a minute, so it's worth your time. Read the abstract. Is it likely to be useful? And you're like, nope, the abstract is totally not what I thought the title was going to be. Then nope, skip. And so this is a fairly quick process. If you've read the title, you've read the abstract, you think, yeah, this maybe could work, the next thing I'm going to recommend that you do is actually open up the PDF and read the conclusion. Are the findings helpful? So don't reread the whole articles. Definitely do not read the whole article at this point, but skip right to the bottom to the conclusion. Are the findings, are what they actually researched, the conclusion is the best place to find that. Are the findings helpful? If you skim read that and it's no good and it's absolutely not where you want your project to go, then that's it. Then that article ends up on the refuse pile. But if you've gone through these 3 steps and you think, yep, this article is actually what we need, then put it in your yes pile. So just set it aside. You can download the PDF, or you can, the library has the ability to for you to hold that and create a list. So add it to your list of things to read afterward, and away you go. So build your list using these 3 steps. So the art of skimming is title, abstract, conclusion. This is what I do. As you're doing this, you're going to have a secondary thing going on in the background, and this is sorting. So this is the beginning of your analysis. People don't always think of it that way, that reading is analysis, but it is. Which articles give you the clearest overview? Let's say that you're looking for an overview article on flooding events in Saskatchewan. Awesome. Well, so any article that gives you a really good overall overview or an overall look, that's a good article to keep. The latest or the newest information, the most recently published. So it's something that you pay attention to is, well, when was the sucker published? Well, if you're a historian, maybe you can look at something that's a lot older and it'll still be within your wheelhouse and you'll still want to read it. But if you're in the sciences, particularly the medical sciences or the natural scientists, you are probably waiting for or needing the latest or the newest information, so the most recently published. So that's something to pay attention to. I always watch for something that's either the most interesting or adversarial or controversial perspective. Those are good ones to add into your list and make sure that you kind of have one that sort of gives the opposing view or the adversarial view. Those are good to add in. Professors really notice that because they notice that you're able to kind of feed that into your argument, which is important. And also anything that talks about future research directions. So especially in the conclusions, if you've gone through your list and you've read the conclusions, like, yep, this one has future research directions, those are good ones to keep on hand as well. Now, as you're doing this, this is about sorting. So this is about figuring out which ones are more useful, which ones are less useful. And then also to start the work about putting the puzzle pieces together. This one kind of feeds with this one, and it sort of fits with this one, but this one's kind of a total outlier. These are some of the sort of sorting questions and fitting together questions that you start to do, and you haven't even actually fully read any of the articles. You've only read the title, the abstract, and at this point, maybe the conclusion. And so you're just building those broad scale overviews, but still you're starting to do that process of sorting and figuring out which, okay, this one's actually more useful, this one's less useful. And then what might happen is that your list maybe you only have to end up with 5, but you'll want to have your list, you want to pick a few more articles than what you need, because you can and you will still reject a few. What you'll find is that as you sit down to actually write the piece, you will refer to some of these articles more and some of these articles less. And in fact, some you might not end up not referring to at all. And that's why you want to make sure that your list of the ones that you're actually going to dive into is just that little bit more broad than just sort of your basic 5. And again, this is just a hypothetical. A lot of professors will give you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They'll give you a specific number in the syllabus, and they'll say you have to reference at least this many. So that's kind of where I was going from on that. So your next step is to take that 5 or 8 or 10 or however many you have on your kind of your long short list and reading deeper and really starting to understand them. And this is how you do it. And the secret of analysis is taking notes. Now, this picture comes from Raul Pacheco Vega. He's a Canadian. He actually works in Mexico, and he does a lot of work, and you'll find him on academic writing, especially on Twitter. And he does a huge amount of work for students, for undergraduate students and for graduate students around the skill set of actually doing research and developing your research. So if you have a chance to check out Raul Pacheco Vega, I really recommend it. But so Raul takes his notes by hand, and he's big on color coding and highlighting and so on and so forth. And that's fine. And that works for some people. Other people might like to take their notes using Evernote or OneNote or any of these other kinds of things. Taking notes right on the PDF, that's also allowable as well. Some people like to develop an Excel sheet with all of their notes. That works really well. Whatever your own process that works best for you, go ahead. But the secret of analysis is actually taking notes. This is the start of your analytical process. And if you start taking notes on each one of the journal articles that you're reading, you're going to be 2/3 of the way to actually completing your papers. So note-taking is your ace in the hole. So that is your secret. Please, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, do that. Note-taking is your beginning analysis. When you take notes on each article, this is about active reading. So this is about you asking questions. So things like who wrote it? When did they write it? Why did they write it? Who funded it? What were they responding to? So were they responding to someone else's article? Well, what article was that? What was their research question? What was their hypothesis? What was their thesis? If you take these kind of active reading questions as you're reading, you will retain a lot more. Even if you just start like, who wrote this paper? And okay, you look at the title and you look at the authors. Well, why did they write the paper? Well, that'll probably be in the introduction. Well, who funded it? Well, that'll be at the very bottom or the back where they kind of reference their funding. Who were they responding to? That'll be part of it as well. But if you take these active questions to what you're doing, you're going to remember a lot better, and you're going to create much better notes. Another thing to watch for, of course, is what methods did they use? What kind of research did they do? Were they historians? Did they just, go into an archive and do a bunch of research in a group of funds that nobody else has touched before? Were they in a lab? Were they conducting research? What kind of lab? What kind of research? Were they doing surveys? Who did they survey? These sorts of things. So asking these questions, what methods did they use? You'll need that information. And then, of course, what were their findings? And their findings are different than their conclusions. So their findings is basically, this is what the research told us. We did this methodology, and these were the results. These were the findings. And then what was their conclusion? And then this is where you get to be a little bit critical. Did their conclusion make sense? Did you believe it? Did it match what their findings were? These were some of the questions that I started to use as an undergraduate researcher. And this is where your own voice and your own confidence really comes into play. You need to have a little bit of confidence in order to feel comfortable questioning. It's like, oh my God, this stuff was peer reviewed by other people. Obviously, this is great. Not necessarily. What if it doesn't make sense to you? Maybe they're assuming too much from their audience. Maybe they're assuming too much background knowledge or information. So these are things that you are allowed and expected to ask. And then what unanswered questions do you have? So you've read the whole paper. What unanswered questions do you have? These are good things to ask. If, as you're doing that analysis, if you come across any really good quotes, things that you'd probably want to put into the paper, this is your time to make sure that you're either highlighting them, putting a star beside them, or actively writing them down in your notes. Capture those good quotes, the ones that you think you might possibly use when you sit down to write your paper. If you're in a hurry, this is how to read strategically. So when I did my PhD, I had to read 100 books in a year. And actually, pardon me, 200 books in a year. And so it's roughly about a book a day, especially if you're not working on the weekends. And I had young kids at the time. So yeah, roughly about a book a day. And believe me, if you're going to read a book a day, you are not reading every word in that book. And it's the same with a journal article. So the tips are read the first and last sentence of a paragraph or of a section. The first and the last sentence should give you a broad scale overview of what it's about, especially if you're in that kind of middle stage where you've finished your skim, you've read the title, the abstract, and the conclusion, and you think you need to read more, but you're still pressed for time. Then this is a good way to shorten your time up a little bit. Read the first and last sentence of a paragraph or a section. Make sure that you understand any graphs or charts or images. So spend a little bit of time on that. That's their methodology and that's their results. So that's important. So if you can understand what they're showing you, any images that they're showing you, you're going to understand the paper a lot better. And finally, if you're in a hurry, watch for their citations. Oftentimes, a peer-reviewed journal article will lead you to other best research in the area, especially papers that are really well cited, papers that provide those good broad scale overviews or are the sort of leading edge paper that everyone else is busy responding to. Those are the papers you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. So read strategically if you're in a hurry. And these are a couple of my tips for that. If you've been taking good notes, you've read each of those articles, whether you've read them in depth or you've been crunched for time and skimmed them a little bit, this is what you do. So you've got your notes, they're your notes, and you're going to put them together. You're going to think, okay, this one talks about this and this one talks about that, but it doesn't talk about this, but this one does. And so you've started to put them together like your puzzle pieces. And this is where you start to pull your analysis. And this is also where you start to do your synthesis and you start to really understand what you know and what you don't know about what you've been reading. So this is what a synthesis is. This is about putting together all the stuff that you've read, figuring out how they fit together, and then to be able to explain it to someone else. So this is exactly what synthesis is, taking your notes, putting them together, fitting them together like a puzzle piece, and then sharing it together. So notes, comparing notes, putting it together, and then reporting it to someone else. And that's more or less what a literature review or a synthesis paper is asking you to do. So if you follow these steps, this is where it's going to get you. All right. Here's where we're going to pause and we're going to shift gears. So the first half, like I said, I was going to talk about some of my tips if you have a lot of articles to try and sort your way through to get yourself down to that 5 or 8. But now we're going to switch gears. This is what is expected of you if you've been asked to just read one article. So this is about a deep dive, diving deep, reading a single journal article and then having to present on just that one article. And these are some of the tips and tricks that I use if I'm asked to present a particular journal article. So the secret of analysis is still note-taking. So yes, you've got the whole journal in front of you and you can use highlighters and you can write on the text or whatever it is that you want to do, but you still want to find a way to organize and actually take notes. And remember that active note-taking is about you asking questions of the text of whatever it is that you're reading. So it's still by far the secret of analysis. First off, if I'm presenting on a single journal article, the first thing that you want to talk about is where does this article fit? What's the larger picture, the background? Why have you been asked to read this article? So think about that as well. What big issue does this article address and how does it fit into the larger picture? What's the context? So that's the first thing that I try and think about is where it fits. Then the second is the rationale and the objective. So why this research? So this is me asking, why did they do this particular research? What was their rationale? What was their purpose? Did they have an objective? You know, were they trying to answer a particular question? Were they trying to survey a particular group of people and just kind of get a broad scale touchstone of what a particular group of people had to say? What was their rationale and their objective for their particular research? So ask those questions first. What's the context and then what's the rationale? And then you're actually asking specific questions. So what was their research question? What was their hypothesis, their thesis? And depending on the discipline, that those are different ways to ask that question. But what's the question being addressed in this journal article? And then, again, you are allowed to be and expected to be critical. Is their research question clear? Is it easy to understand? Is it a good question to ask? Do you think it's worthwhile? These are absolutely valid questions for you to be asking. And this is a good way for you to learn how to evaluate an article, because when you're giving a presentation on a single journal article, you're not just parroting back what it said, you are being expected to evaluate it, to give a bit of critical feedback about that article. So keep that in mind. Your voice is actually part of the presentation. Asking to dig deep, what's their methodology? How did they set up and conduct their data collection? So what did they do to generate the information or the data that they used to write this article? My goodness, there's things incoming. Sorry about that. So the questions to ask are things like, were their methods clear or were they biased? Why did they choose this particular technique? What are the advantages or drawbacks or limitations of this methodology? So just to ask some of these sorts of questions. Is there a way that they could have done it different? That's oftentimes a question that I will ask. Whatever their methodology is, why did they choose it? Why did they set it up this way? But the third question, what are the advantages or disadvantages or the drawbacks and limitations of this methodology? That actually gives you really critical insight. And if you're able to articulate that, especially when you go to present about that article, that goes a long way to ensuring your understanding of that article. Somebody really needs to get a hold of me. Number 5, what were the findings or results? So this is how to explain a few of the main findings. You don't have to explain all of them when you're giving a journal article presentation, but usually you want to pick a few of the main findings. So you're looking at the data, the figures and charts. That's often what they use to showcase results. Unless you're a historian like me, in which case that's usually the storytelling component. What was particularly surprising or noteworthy? That's something that I often pay attention to, is that, and research doesn't have to always be surprising or noteworthy. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking every time. Sometimes research can just show the status quo, and that's also important. Or it can show, nope, there was no result or a null result, and that's important too. So it just depends on the context, but you can pay attention to that and ask that question. Then again, to be critical, was the data fully explained, or was there anything random or out of place? Did everything actually fit together, or did you feel like a portion of their research or a portion of their data just didn't fit? So that's something for you to think about as well. Anytime you're going to present about a journal article, it is critical that you talk about what were their conclusions and what did they lay out as the next steps, the next logical steps in the research. So summarize their conclusion. Did their conclusion line up with the question, the methods, and the results? And did you agree with it? Did you find it convincing? Why or why not? Again, your critical voice is part of what's expected when you analyze a journal article. So make sure that you're allowing yourself the confidence to actually say what you think. It's really important. And then, what are they planning to do to take this study further? So you can repeat whatever it is that they said that they think is the logical next step, but then also to criticize that. What ways do you think that they could take that study further? Or potentially, do they need to redo this study? Do you think that there were limitations to how they originally set it up? Was some kind of limitation in the way that they collected their data, or a different way that they should think about collecting their data that might give them different results? So these are all ways that you can consider that. And then, what other questions did this article raise for you? So they have their thoughts on where they should go next, but you might have your own thoughts. It's like, this didn't really answer this, or I'm curious about that. Now, it might be that this is a question for you to research and maybe go back into the library into the journal articles and see if someone else has addressed this particular research question. So this might be a starting point for you to take it on and do your next research project and do your next analysis of where the state of the research in this particular area. Or it could be that you've uncovered an area that hasn't yet been explored. So this might be a really great honors project or a capstone project if you might have raised something that nobody else has actually studied yet. So that's certainly another thing to look for. Final summation and critique. So what this is, and I'm thinking about this in particular if you're presenting about a single journal article to a class or to a tutorial or to a journal club or anything like that, you need to give that sort of final summation and critique. So this is where you take your notes, think about them, think about which parts of this particular article you liked or that you really learned from, which parts of the article that you thought, they could have done this a little bit different, or I thought that this was problematic. So anything that you have that's a bit more of a criticism of the article, any further research thoughts, any further research directions, either that they've brought up that you think are interesting or that you thought of as you read this article. It's like, I think that this really opens up this whole new area. And so you could talk about, I'd like to learn more about, or you can say there hasn't been any research about this particular area. So future research directions. And then the final point is where you would ask for and invite conversation and questions from the audience. Now, of course, with our online situation, some classes you're just being asked to present on a journal article and you don't have that back and forth like you would have inside class. But in other cases, you do have that live Q&A session. And if you do have a live Q&A session, the more prepared you are, so the more the better your notes and the better that you've dove in and really understood this article, the better you're going to be able to handle the research, the any kind of Q&A that potentially comes up. The other side of that is that you will be able to handle the Q&A much better if you take that active questioning into the journal article with you, to actually think about what they did well, what you think they could have done better or explained better. So to bring your own critical voice and to allow yourself to have that critical voice, that'll be part of it as well. So if you can bring all of that together, that's your final summation and critique. And honestly, and then you finish. So I realize that this was very, very quick and a very quick overview. However, you might want to just follow through, and just depending if you have a whole bunch of journal articles, like, okay, I need to go through this really fast. How do I do this fast? How do I skim? The first half of this session is all for that. And the second half is for if you have to do that deep dive. And that is where I am at. So I will stop sharing my screen, start my video, stop recording,